Hello everyone. This is InDesign 1, Week 5, Webcast 3. This will be a short webcast on packaging an InDesign file. I'm just going to go through the steps that's required to package a file, and it won't take long. Okay, I'm going to pull up a demo file here. This is a file that has lots of pages, as you can see. In addition to lots of pages, I'm going to go over to my links panel, take a quick look, and I see that I have lots and lots of links. And I know that if I want to work on this file on a different system, I'm going to need every single image that's been linked to this file. I'm going to need to have a copy of every font that's being used with this file, if I want this file to appear the exact same way on another computer using InDesign. So this is the workflow that we talked about, and in the previous webcast we were talking about a package workflow versus creating a PDF for review workflow. If I had to go into all of my image folders in my operating system and make a copy of all of these, put them in a new folder, put them on a thumb drive, go and figure out every font that's used in this file, which I can see I have lots of fonts that were in this, 17 different fonts. I would have to go into my font directory where I keep all of my fonts, make copies of each of those, again, put them on some sort of device that I could move and plug into another computer. And this is where the packaging process comes in. I only know of 2 applications that provide this feature. Quark Express had this for years, and I was so excited when Adobe created InDesign and they made sure that it had this feature in it. I just wish that I had this feature in a lot of other applications that I work in. So I am going to package this file, but before I package it, I'd like to make sure that I don't have any errors in the file that I might have to fix. What if I had some links that were missing or some fonts that were missing? Those would not end up in the package. Because what this package is going to do, this packaging command, is going to create a separate folder that's going to contain a copy of this InDesign document that I'm packaging, the fonts used in the document, and any imported graphics. And if I had any missing fonts or I had any missing links, they would show up here under my pre-flight area. And in fact, in older versions of InDesign, when you went to the File menu, you would have the package command and you would also have the pre-flight command. But this is gone now since pre-flight has become a constant function in the background. But even so, just keep in mind that it's probably a good idea just to be sure that you don't have any errors. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is go to my File menu and choose Package. And if I have a large document, which I do with lots of images, it's going to take a couple seconds to get this to come up. And I know this is small because I'm having to share my entire desktop, so I hope you guys can see this. On the left side, we have several tabs that provide additional information, and we're going to go through some of those. Anything that has a yellow triangle is an alert telling me that I might have some potential problems. Let's just start at the top where it says, what is the scope of this package? It's going to be the entire publication. There are 21 fonts used, there are 0 missing, 4 embedded, and there are 2 protected. So I'm going to take a look at this fonts menu, or the fonts tab, and scroll through this, and I see that in fact 2 fonts, Critter and Flower Ornaments, is protected. I'm a little concerned about this because if a font is protected, sometimes it does not package. I usually never run into this because I'm using, for the most part, purchased fonts, good quality open type fonts, and I know for a fact that Critter I downloaded off of a website, and I think I got Flower Ornaments through some sort of free download that was on InDesignSecrets.com. So I would normally not use these 2, but I was having some fun in this file, and these are the 2 that are marked as protected. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on these 2. Going back to the summary, I see that the actual warning is in links and images. And I don't have any missing images. I don't have any inaccessible images. But what it's warning me about is that there are 31 images, and 29 of them are using the RGB color space, even though this is a printed document. And when I started this document, I started it as a CMYK document. So by seeing this, I know that I have to do one of two things. I'm going to eventually have to go in and change those 29 images from an RGB color space to a CMYK color space. Or I'm going to be able to export this as a PDF that will convert those RGB images to CMYK images. So I'm aware of this, and that's not going to stop me from packaging it. I'm fine with that, and as I work forward with it, I'll deal with those problems. I'm going to take a quick look here at colors and inks. And this is where I do have a problem, which I'm not going to deal with right now. But notice I have a CMYK document, but I also have 4 spot colors, which means that if this was to be printed at a professional printer, this would be an 8-plate job, which would cost a lot of money. So before I print it, I will either have to go to the Ink Manager, which is a function, a feature in this application, and tell it to break these out into CMYK, or check and see if I really do want this document. Well, I have to print it in CMYK if it's going to go to an offset printer. So those are my options. I'm going to have to take these 4 colors and somehow break them out into CMYK. And we're going to get into that in another webcast where you can go into your Ink Manager and force those colors to be converted on the fly, by the way. I don't have to permanently change them. I have that choice of doing that, going into my swatches panel and fixing it, or I can just on the export function, I can have them broken out into CMYKs. There's a summary of the print settings, which I'm not ready to print, so I'm not worried about this right at the moment. And then the last thing is, are there any external plugins being used in InDesign that were important to the functionality of this file? And I can see that I don't have any. Sometimes I do have plugins. There are lots of plugins that you can get for InDesign, purchased ones and free ones. And if that plugin influences any of the functionality, you may have a problem on the other computer. So it's just always a good idea to glance at it. If you were using a plugin, you would probably know. All right, so I'm okay with this information, and I'm going to go ahead and click Package. The first thing that comes up is an instructions window. And if you think about why we package documents, it makes more sense why we have this printing instructions dialog. If you are sending a file to be printed by a printer using InDesign files, they're going to need all of the images, all of the fonts. But in addition to that, if they were going to have any problems with the file, let's say that for some reason you had saved this in a different version of InDesign that the printer did not have. This instructions file gives contact information, company address information, phone number, special instructions. And this is saved as a TXT file. And what's nice about that is that the printer can open this file up, this file that's going to be generated from this dialog, in any word processing program. I mean, anything from any text editing program to Microsoft Word. They could even import it into InDesign if they wanted to. But the fact that they have access to these instructions without needing any particular application is very helpful. In most cases, I just click continue and I delete this file later, but there have been a few times where I really wanted to make sure that the printer had extra information. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue without filling it out. And I get a browser window because it wants to know where do I want to place this folder. Because it's going to be not just a file, it's going to be a folder that contains several of these items, the fonts, the images, and a copy of this InDesign file. And I'm going to go ahead and place it in week 5 because that's the week we're working on right now. And it defaults to the folder name of the file name plus the word folder. Lots of times I'm creating an archive or a cleaned up version, and I will often date that folder. So I might say demo file project and then give today's date. I'm going to go ahead and leave that at demo file folder for now, but you can edit this any way you want as far as changing the letters go. Before I do that though, I want to take a look at the options that I have to include in this folder. By default, you will see copy fonts, copy linked graphics, and update graphic links and package. In the fonts, it's going to include every font except CJK fonts. Those are your Chinese, Japanese, and Korean fonts. And if you are working in Asian languages like this, you will want to make sure that you are talking to a printer, and you will probably be using possibly a different version of InDesign. So I know that I want to copy my fonts for the printer, but more importantly, I want to make sure that every graphic that is linked to this file is copied and placed in an images folder. When you change the location of an image, as we know from our links podcast or webcast, we know that InDesign loses track of it. So what InDesign is willing to do for us is when it packages these images into a separate folder, it updates the links from their original location to the new links or images folder in the package. That is a significant help to us. It's going to save us all kinds of time. The bottom three options are not normally checked. Use document hyphenation exceptions only, include fonts and links from hidden and non-printing content, and to also view the report. And the report is basically a data dump of that window we were looking at that showed the yellow triangle with the links and showed the colors that were being used. And in most cases, I don't have a need to check these, but if one of these rings a bell for something in your project, you may want to do that. Okay, I'm ready to go ahead and click Package. You will always receive this warning unless you click this checkbox that says Don't Show Again. And it is just a warning that some fonts have restrictions by the service provider. And you are required to comply with applicable copyright laws and terms. Because essentially when I make a copy of these fonts and I give them to someone else, I am violating the copyright law for those fonts. But service providers often have special, special privileges that allow them to use the fonts to print your job as long as they don't keep the fonts for their own personal or their own company benefit. So that's all it's saying, and that some of the fonts may not want to be embedded. I have never had that happen, but I know lots of people have when they have fonts that are free fonts or less expensive fonts. I have never had that problem when I have purchased a font from the Adobe website or another acknowledged font manufacturer. But at the same time, those are expensive fonts. So I would hope that they would not give me any problems when I was trying to package them. So in most cases, I mean, once you've read this once, you're just going to ignore it and go ahead and click OK. You can see that it's going through, excuse me, in pre-flighting. It's packaging the links right now, which I have lots of links. This is going to take several seconds to do. Then it's saving the document. Now right before I chose this command, I saved this demo file. If you have made changes to the file, you've been working at it, and then you choose File Package, you will be prompted that before it can package the file, it has to save it. And you'll have to save the file first. All right, let's now jump over to my Finder. And this is the folder that I placed it in InDesign 1, Week 5. And I see that I have a demo file folder, just as it said it would name it. I'm going to go ahead and open this. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And you can see I have my document fonts. Have all been placed in there. Even Critter and Flower, surprisingly enough. Those were the two that were protected fonts, but they came over, it looks like, just fine. I want to say just a word about this Adobe Font 14 list. Starting with, I believe CS5 is when this started. In order to comply with pressure, I am sure, from font manufacturers, Adobe figured out a way to create a pointer file from the InDesign file to the fonts that are required. So instead of having to now install these fonts on my local system, this pointer, this LST file, is going to communicate with the font manager for my system, regardless of whether that is a Mac or a PC, and it will give my system access to these fonts just for this file, which means that I will be able to change any text that uses these fonts, add any text that uses these fonts in InDesign for this file. But if I go into another file, or I open up Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, those fonts will not be present in my font menu, unless I happen to own them and they're already installed on my computer. This was a big jump for everyone because it seemed to please not only a lot of graphic artists who are constantly loading lots of fonts on their systems and they don't want that many on the system, so they purchase third-party font manufacturer management programs that allow you to turn fonts on and off on the fly. It also obviously made the font manufacturers happy because people weren't loading these fonts and using them as their own. So that's the document fonts. The links folder contains all of the images that were linked to my InDesign file, and they have been all pulled from all different places on my hard drive and copied and placed into one spot. And as I mentioned earlier, now my InDesign file, which is inside of this folder, has been relinked to the links in this folder rather than where the links originally were. And here's my instruction.txt file, which of course I can just delete if I'm not going to use it. Going forward, I have two choices here. I can either go forward and use this file if I was using this as a cleanup method, which I said I do quite often. I've been working on a project for 3 months, and as I said in a previous webcast, I've got all kinds of redundancies and old images and things that I no longer want associated with this InDesign file. So by doing a package, I leave all of those behind and I can start with a clean slate with just the things that are being used in this particular file. So in that case, what I'll do is I'll take the old folder, I'll archive it somewhere, because maybe at some point I do want those old images that are not going to be used in this particular project. But I would go forward using this file. Now if you were doing a let's see, kind of a time capsule thing where I'm saying, okay, as of this date, this is what was included in this file, then it may be the flip situation where I might be packaging this file so that I can archive the package and then move forward with the project. But for whatever reason you want to use it, that's going to dictate how you're going to use this new InDesign file. Because remember, this file here is no longer this file. This is a separate file that's been copied and placed in the package folder. And if I go back to my InDesign file, and I work forward, and let's say 3 weeks from today I package it again, I'm going to get yet another InDesign file placed in that folder. That's just something I want everyone to be really clear about, that you are making a copy of not only the fonts and the images, but you are making a copy of the InDesign file that you're packaging. Don't forget too that if you are using OpenType fonts, the nice thing about packaging is that now those fonts would be available to anybody who is moving a document from a Macintosh to a PC or a PC to a Macintosh. That's not going to be the case for all of these TrueType fonts. These may or may not work. Sometimes TrueType fonts that originate, there are Windows, I should say, TrueType fonts, sometimes work on a Mac, but it's never the opposite. The TrueType fonts on the Mac will not work on a PC. So this is going to be a problem if I want to move this file to a Macintosh because I'm on a Windows machine right at the moment. But all of these fonts here, all of these are going to work on a Macintosh. So that's another great argument for using OpenType fonts. Okay, that's it for packaging. Anybody have any questions? Please send me an email or post it on the blog. Until next time, signing off.